Major support for Carolina Business Review is provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Colonial Life, providing benefits to employees to help them protect their family, their finances, and their futures. And Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
So often when we talk about things like business, economic growth, community growth and development, we use terms like density, urban core, multifamily housing, transportation, land use planning. And rarely, if ever, are those terms and concepts used in conjunction with the Carolinas' single largest business, agriculture. I'm Chris William. Welcome again to the most widely watched source of Carolina business, policy, and public affairs, continuously seen each week on PBS for 28 years. Thank you for supporting this dialogue. On this week's discussion, we host both North and South Carolina's Commissioners of Agriculture, the Honorable Steve Troxler, and the Honorable Hugh Weathers. We hope you'll stay with us.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Visit us at southcarolinablues.com. Barings, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review features Steve Troxler, North Carolina Agriculture Commissioner, and Hugh E. Weathers, South Carolina Commissioner of Agriculture.
Hello, welcome to our program. Gentlemen, thank you both for taking time to join us.
Great to be here.
Glad to be here.
We were talking before the program. You know each other well. You work together fairly well? Is that okay to say?
Not only do we work together well, we're friends and have been for a long time. So it's a great relationship between North and South Carolina.
And there's a good friendly competition from time to time.
Okay. We've heard that. We've heard that before. Well, Your Honor's welcome. Let's talk about agribusiness. Everybody's always assumed and said in generalities, agribusiness, the biggest single industry in both North and South Carolina. Commissioner Troxler, we'll start with you. How big is it?
Well, agribusiness and agriculture in North Carolina is $87 billion. And if you want to put that in comparison, the military is about $66 billion. With all the banking and tourism in North Carolina, if you ask the average North Carolinian what's the largest industry in the state, probably they would give you an incorrect answer, but it's agriculture and agribusiness.
Sir?
Same thing for South Carolina, that you'd get the wrong answer. And given that South Carolina is about half the size of North Carolina, our numbers just under $42 billion, a little over 212,000 jobs connected. And I think the reason people get the wrong answer, they think it's farming. Well, production agriculture is the base of everything that happens from the time Steve or I or any farmer grows something and the time it's consumed. It's quite a collaborative process that makes up agribusiness.
Do you feel like, and this is not meant to be just a provocative question, but so many times when you've got a business that's been in place, doing well, and impacting the economy for so long, it almost doesn't get the attention that it requires. Do you feel like the General Assembly's, the State House, on Jones Street has overlooked, doesn't say it, but do you get the legislative help and backing that you both feel like you need?
Well, in North Carolina, we are lucky that we have some rural people in leadership in both houses of the legislature. So we've done, the Department and Agriculture, I think, have done fairly well in North Carolina. But if you take it a little further, the urban rural divide that is happening and all the population that's moving into both of these states, sooner or later we know that it's going to be more problematic to get things done for agriculture in that legislative building.
Yeah, sir.
We do find that the typical consumer, the non-farm consumer, is 3 generations, 4 generations now removed from a direct connection to agriculture. And that applies to members of our General Assembly as well. So it puts the burden on Steve and on myself and other advocates for the industry, whether it's land grants or others, to deliver that message of what agriculture does for the culture of our states, for the economy of our states, but especially in the rural areas of each of our states.
So and not to interrupt you, sorry, sir, but going back to this idea of urban-rural divide, that does come up a lot.
It does, but now people have a great interest in who's growing my food, how are they growing it. Social media, in some respects, diminishes that urban divide, because the person in downtown Charlotte, Charleston, wherever, they want to know what's going on in Iredell County, in Orangeburg County, how their food's being grown. They think, and rightfully so, they impact the practices that we do in agriculture. But again, it makes our job even more important to deliver the message to the leaders, because their job is to allocate resources from the state budget to invest in where each state can advance.
Your Honor, what does that urban-rural divide look like for you?
Well, with North Carolina's population changing so much, most of the inflow of people has been around the large cities, the municipalities, and we're actually losing population in the rural areas that are agriculture. So when it comes time to redistrict, what we're going to see is, I think we're going to have less representation in rural areas and more in the cities. So the education process that we have to go through is going to be much more important than it is now, and it's going to be more difficult. People, I think, when they go into the grocery store today, the younger people are beginning to think about how was the food grown, where was it grown, but price always plays into to selling anything. So I think people go into the grocery store, it's not a first thought that this came from a farm. All of this food that we have in the United States that's relatively inexpensive, it's safe, it all starts at the farm level.
Does it, I want to unpack this a little bit more. Does it make, and you're both from farming families, generationally been on the farm, do farmers feel like they're being left behind in this type of divide as we talk about it?
There's a sense of frustration, but farmers, is great. It's a privilege to work with and for farmers, say that. But most of them, in their independent nature, prefer to operate their farms and do the things that they've done for generations or first generation, and sort of leave the engagement to others. Now that's an average. So yes, there's a sense of frustration in that they don't have the impact that we know is needed. But we do, I think Steve would agree, when it's time for some critical issues, they will leave and come and bring their messages to the State House, and they're a lot more effective at delivering that than either Steve or I are, just because of the grassroots and the sincerity that they bring about the passion that they have about agriculture. So there is a little bit of a sense of what you're asking.
Yes, sir. How do you describe that?
Well, I think in North Carolina, we are fortunate to have really good partnerships with our farm groups, the Farm Bureau, the Agribusiness Council, the Grange, and then we've got so many commodity organizations, and people in rural areas do belong to these organizations. One thing that we're doing is we have Ag Appreciation Day in Raleigh, which is coming up March the 20th, and we're trying to bring all of the farmers that we can get to Raleigh to talk to legislators to make their voices known. And who hit it on the head? They're more effective than anybody else because they are the constituents that are electing the legislators in Raleigh.
And I asked Mr. Weathers this, do you feel like they're being left behind? Do they feel like they're being left behind?
In some measure they do, and it's because of that, knowing that the majority of the legislature is from the large cities in North Carolina. But you flip that around, we had the tremendous disaster in North Carolina from Hurricanes Florence and Tropical Storm Matthew, and I went and asked for a relief package for agriculture and for farmers, and amazingly, that passed out of the Senate and the House unanimously and was signed by the governor. There was never a vote against it. So I think we've been effective at educating our legislators and elected officials, but I know it's going to become much more difficult.
Break that down by demographics within the younger farmers that we work with.
Well, how would you define a younger farmer? 30-something?
35 or they are more engaged, and they're not saying we're left behind. We're going to get engaged, and they are a great voice to be heard in all arenas, be it state, federal, whatnot. Some of the more seasoned farmers, like myself, I tell them the average age farmer in South Carolina is about 60, and I'm finally above average by 2 years.
That's good.
Some of our more seasoned farmers might fit what you described, and that will impact their outlook on the next coming years.
You know, you both kind of referred to this. I want to come back to the idea that people want to know, certainly younger demographic wants to know where their food's coming from. And there's this, of course, this movement about farm to table, very popular in a lot of cities and even some rural areas. Is that enough of a, I'm not going to answer the question the right way, but I think you both are going to know, is that enough of momentum and even novelty about farm to table to reinvigorate or at least put some oomph behind that part of farming?
You know, there are several parts to being successful in farming, and of course local foods is one of them, and we have really worked hard on that in North Carolina. But when you move beyond that, we are so efficient in agriculture that we've got to have more markets than just the local markets. We've got to have national markets and maybe even more importantly, international markets. 95% of the population that eat live outside the borders of the United States. So if we're going to grow opportunity, we've got to have all of this put together in a package, and all three segments need to be successful.
We're fortunate in this country that you can choose your food supply any form just about you want. Organic, sustainable, grass-fed, you name it, or traditional routes. And it's great to live in this country where agriculture gives you those choices at the most economical value on the face of this earth, by far. So we probably cater our message to those more engaged, the millennials, the foodies, because they respond and they are having more influence on those who maybe sit more on the sidelines, but I think that's an influential group that we both try to speak to.
Commissioner Weathers, I want to ask you this, and as you describe it, I think of the brewery business, the private label, the small brewer that's but it's certainly gotten a lot of momentum in both states. It almost seems like farms are doing that in a different way. They're being much more responsive very quickly. As you said, foodies and driving that. Is that true?
You're describing vertical integration.
Yes.
Not just produce the raw product, but take and add value to it and possibly deliver a retail product, be it in a 12-ounce can of beer or a keg, or now the boutique distilleries. But that's just one piece. Those farmers who are willing to engage face-to-face with the public in a more marketing-oriented business strategy, they will gain a greater share of that retail value. When you go to the grocery store and spend $1 on food, about 16 cents on average gets back to the farm. So all of the other value is added in between production and final consumption. But those farmers that are gaining a greater share than 16% with the work that is involved, I think they'll reap the benefits because of taking that risk, if you will, to go up that supply chain.
And I was going to say, you take it even a step further. In North Carolina, agri-tourism has become a big business among our farmers, and a way to, and also a way to educate the public. My wife and I actually have a facility, event center that we bring people to the farm for weddings, receptions, rehearsals, business meetings. So all of this interaction, it makes us money, but also the interaction is very important with the educational aspect that goes along with it.
So farm to table, but also table to farm.
That's right.
It goes both ways. Yeah. It's it'd be hard pressed to not think there would be this huge impact when U.S. brought China to the trade table and made it a point to start negotiating a new deal across several industries. We know that China was buying about 30% of the U.S. tobacco market. There's no better place that grows tobacco than the Carolinas. The other thing is, of course, butterball turkeys, and now there is no turkey exporting to some places in the Pacific Rim. So let's unpack this a little bit. Commissioner Weathers, what happens to the tobacco industry when you don't have a country like China purchasing at this point?
Well, what happens is what we have focused on probably over the last number of months, and with the Trump administration's market facilitation program, there's allocation to regional groups that North Carolina and South Carolina belong to, where we're trying to develop alternative markets and not have all of our cigarettes in one basket or all of our eggs in that big China basket. So right now, as we speak, that's our focus, is to diversify our outlets around the world. But you still have to bear in mind that the China market is just that. It's that significant. So we need our trade negotiators to stay at the table with them to get a deal that can be sustained.
And I promise to give you a chance on this, but I want to ask you a follow-up question. Do you feel like you can diversify to other new untapped markets quickly enough to backfill what China was buying?
It'll be hard to replace in a quick fashion the volume that China represents, but that's where our focus is. So that's a difficult answer to give you.
Yeah. Commissioner Trump.
Well, North Carolina is the #1 tobacco producing state in the nation, and we produce about 80% of all the flue-cured tobacco that's grown. So the China problem with trade has greatly impacted us. In fact, our department has spent a tremendous amount of time to get China into the U.S. market, even to the point that they opened an office in Cary. Mm-hmm. So when that 30% of the market went away after the tobacco had been produced, it pretty much collapsed the market. Mm-hmm. That 30% is still, for the most part, sitting on the shelf at leaf dealers. And so with no contracts this year from China, it's had a tremendous impact. Secretary Perdue and I have had the discussion of did we put all our eggs in one basket when we went and got China in this market? And the answer is pretty much, well, there was nowhere else to go. Mm-hmm. They have more smokers in China than we have people in the United States, so it was a natural fit to help them upgrade the quality of the cigarettes that they were producing by using American tobacco, and it was sailing along very well, but when the trade disagreement started, it all collapsed.
So how, and again, I don't want to spend the rest of the program on this, but how long, what is the tipping point for the tobacco industry, and how long can they take the slings and arrows of this trade war?
I can tell you that we're at a tipping point right now. I think we will grow probably the smallest crop of tobacco in the United States that we have grown since World War II. That's a long time ago. So we're having to concentrate now on, is there something out there, a combination of crops out there that we can ease into to take up some of the slack that this problem has created. And we've got a new crops initiative in North Carolina looking at what are the things that we can grow. Of course, in North South Carolina, many states, industrial hemp is the hot topic right now.
But there was a limit on that for a while from the federal government about the hemp.
Well, that's been changed. Yeah. But as Steve was pointing out, that our farmers have to adjust. And in South Carolina, we were never quite the force in tobacco as North Carolina. We didn't have the infrastructure to support it. Many of those acres have converted to peanuts, a great crop, again, that depends a great deal, not as much on the Chinese market as does tobacco, but again, very much a world traded commodity, as are most of the commodities of corn and wheat and cotton, traded around the world, and rainfall in Brazil can have more impact on our farmers as rainfall in Raleigh. So.
Yeah. This is a side, almost random thing, but we had a peach grower on this program maybe a year ago, and I never realized that a single peach farm in South Carolina, and I know you'll know who this is, produces more peaches than the state of Georgia, and they're called the Peach State.
Good marketing.
Great marketing.
They got a 50-year head start on South Carolina in the mid 1800s.
Well, I think you've caught up easily. Well, so let's unpack this part a little bit. Hemp, cannabis, CBD oil. these seem like growth markets. If you take the religious component, the principle that's being debated, the legalistic part federally out of this, is this a growth area for the Carolinas?
Well, Hugh alluded to it. The 2018 Farm Bill actually removed hemp as a Schedule I narcotic.
Okay.
So that's made it legal to grow. We've been growing it under a pilot program that was legal from the 2014 Farm Bill. So there's opportunity there, but I want to apply my theory of agricultural economics to this situation. If you put a good profit margin in front of a farmer, we're going to farm our way out of it as quickly as possible by overproduction. I can see that coming.
If we're not careful.
If we're not careful.
Yes,
And
okay.
there are things
said.
that we're going to do in North Carolina and try to do to help, no offense, Hugh, but we want to become in the forefront of this.
He's going to copy us, is what he's going to do.
We actually think that we need the regulatory authority to be able to control the production of CBD oil. And I can tell you why. Just in the last month, we've had one instance of CBD oil causing a health problem, supposed health problem, and we investigated. It was being produced in a kitchen that also had animals in it.
Yeah.
We had a funeral facility in Greensboro that actually blew up and blew the top off the facility producing CBD oil. So there's a right way and a wrong way to do this, and I think there needs to be guidance out there to do it, to produce it.
Couldn't that be written off, though? Early days, early stage development, don't really know how to manage this product or the production of the product yet?
It's the Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
And we've been through it with other commodities, and there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. CBD oil is for human consumption. So if it's not produced safely, we can get a bad name right off the bat because of health problems associated with bad production practices.
The crop has tremendous potential, not just in the oil extracts, but in the fiber-based, whether you make hempcrete to make a stronger concrete, or do you make fiber-based products that might go into our manufacturing of automobiles or airplanes, like we do a lot of in the state. The history of hemp since 8000 BC tells you that the crop will have a place. It is, as Steve says, our job and responsibility is to help manage the potential, help manage the opportunities for farmers, that we don't have questionable processor prospects come into our state and promise the world and deliver very little. So we take the potential very seriously. We take the responsibilities very seriously, and we're kind of looking at these first few years as really demanding more attention so that we don't let that happen.
If we follow the natural progression, hemp, CBD oil, cannabis growing and sales, how would you handicap South Carolina and North Carolina on actually becoming a state that would allow cannabis use, sale, distribution, et cetera, et cetera?
So you've moved into medical marijuana.
Right, yes, sir.
Or recreational marijuana.
That never happens.
Yeah.
Kidding, of course.
Yeah. You know, our focus, our legislatures make those decisions. Given an opinion, we are focused on the potential of industrial hemp. Does medical marijuana have a place? It probably does, in a very controlled application. There's as much research that says medical marijuana will lead people down other paths that they don't get the full benefit.
Right.
Other research will tell you it's a great, I'm going to say homeopathic style of treatment, but has all the benefits. Our job is right now is to help manage industrial hemp. I think it has it has much broader application than cannabis, and a higher THC level of cannabis.
Than the cannabis product.
I think we could see some medical marijuana grown at some time in North Carolina, but I can tell you what a former Commissioner of Agriculture from Colorado told me. They gave the department out there the responsibility on marijuana, and he said, if they give you that responsibility, resign then. Don't wait till the next day. So
Really?
it becomes a very hard thing to manage because of
the politics around the product? Or?
Well, it's a lot of different things. If you look at the taxation of the product, the growing of the product, the THC levels of the product. I mean, there's a lot to it. Where the marijuana, what I understand is where marijuana used to have a THC level, you know, maybe 5%. There's some out there that go up 28, 29, 30% now. So how do you differentiate that, and what is a safe level for people to consume if it's recreational?
I don't expect it's going to happen this year, next year, but
No.
Your Honors, thank you, because these aren't easy issues you deal with. Thank you for your leadership for so many years. Commissioner Weathers, good to have you on the program.
Great,
Commissioner
great to
Troxler,
be here.
thank you. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions or comments about anything we've discussed or any program, you can watch it or comment at carolinabusinessreview.org. Thank you. Happy spring, happy Easter. Until next week, I'm Chris William. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by Bearings, Grant Thornton, Colonial Life, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.